I had a child care provider who's one of her children she services receives a subsidy from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services for a family that is low income and receiving assistance, and the check didn't come. So it's a problem for the family because they're trying to provide their child care so they can work. It's a problem for the child care provider because, well, they're willing to take in children and accommodate that. That's their income. And so if they have bills to pay and they're not getting paid, that's a problem. So we're working with them to connect them with MDHHS and make sure that they get the payment for the services rendered. We have a similar situation with the child care provider who received a check in error from the state of Michigan. The check that they never cashed, and upon direction, voided and returned to the state. And now they're being told that they owe the amount of the check that was never cashed. So we've connected them with Treasury. We're helping to make sure that line of communication is open. We don't do the case for them. They're their advocates, but we're letting the department know that we're working with our constituent and making sure that it gets resolved in good faith. I and every state representative serves roughly 90,000 people in our community, regardless of party. I ask how I can help. I don't ask, who did you vote for? I work to make policies better through the committee process. And I need to hear from you on how policies impact you, your business, your life, the community. I have a limited scope of vision. I try with outreach to expand that as far as I can. But the more input I get from community members, the more effective I can be in Lansing. I need to know about the issues you care about. I need to hear the positions of the community because while I represent 90,000 people, 90,000 people don't take the same position on issues. But it's important that I understand what that looks like in our community. I can serve you better when you contact me. You can contact me via a call, an email, attend a community conversation. Thank you for joining me this morning. Or a visit to the Capitol. I occupy your office. Thank you for lending me the use of it for this term. I provide updates and information. I look at hot button issues. What are people calling and asking questions about? I look at department reports. Anything that looks out of the ordinary, those are things that I pick out to address. I host community conversations regularly. I provide mailings and e-newsletters monthly. I pick topics to host town halls, round tables, and attend community events. I visit local businesses and organizations to have a better scope of understanding of who I'm representing and how do I make that the most vibrant part of our community. I connect community members with resources. Often I hear, why don't we have? And often there are resources available in the community that people just don't know about. And I can help connect people with those resources. I advocate in the budget for our needs in our community. I can provide recognitions like tributes for milestone birthdays, anniversaries, significant community or business events. So if you know of something that's happening coming up and you'd like that to be recognized, I mean, we have the 50th anniversary for the Warren Symphony Orchestra, something I'm excited to be able to celebrate. If you need a guest speaker for a community event, local organizations, schools, or scout groups, that's something I can come speak to on what is government, what is leadership, what is my background and how I've approached situations. I always address legislative updates from Lansing. You often get the soundbite, the headline, but you don't always get the scope of what is the situation on both sides, and maybe how did I come to the decision on how I voted on a topic. And that's something that I can dig into more in a community conversation. So committees, lots of good things happening in committees. Education, we tackled cursive writing. There was a request. A lot of people feel like our young people don't have a good grasp of cursive as many of us had. formal instruction on Danielian writing and cursive writing. And so we've tasked the Department of Education with identifying a cursive writing program that they can recommend to districts for adoption and instruction. Insurance and financial services. We really talked about in the last month Bank On. So a lot of people in the community do not participate in formalized banking. They don't have a bank account. They often resort to payday lenders in order to take care of their banking needs, and that perpetuates problems in poverty. So we know with high interest rates on payday loans, people get themselves into a cycle of debt that is very difficult to dig out of. There is pathways for restricted bank accounts. So sometimes those same people who are struggling to pay bills month to month also get into trouble with overdraft fees. And then they're like, why am I even putting my money there when I need it? All of a sudden I'm $100 in debt again. So there are these bank accounts available through Bank On. And if you know someone in the community who would benefit from them, please let me know, connect them to me. I have some additional information on Bank On and how people can access that. I also attended the National Conference of Insurance Legislators, and two of the hot topics were catalytic converter thefts. You know, when I go to these conferences, I'm like, what are they going to talk about insurance? Like, stick a needle in my eye. But it's always something interesting that they think of that you're like, I didn't think about, you know, what is the impact on our insurance rates, on insurance companies, and how are they evaluating risk? So we are in a community that has been targeted for catalytic converter theft, and that's been very problematic. They looked at, like, do we add criminal penalties? Do we add policies? And one of the very innovative solutions they recommended is having VIN numbers added to catalytic converters. Because it's not identifiable, the cops can't tell if that's a real resale converter or if it has been taken out of a vehicle. So they're looking at what we can do, and one of those things is as simple as adding a VIN. Communities where they've done this, they move on because they don't want to get. It's easy. It's a good turn on investment because catalytic converters have the highest, most expensive elements in them in a vehicle. So it's something to consider. On the Military Veterans Services and Homeland Security Committee, the House Committee recommended to the House of Representatives that we take up the legislation allowing those who are serving in the National Guard for Michigan be able to transfer their education benefits to a child or a spouse. So not everyone who serves is interested in getting those classes and continuing that, but often they have a child or a spouse who is supporting them through their service and would benefit from those earned benefits. So they've earned help and support through college coursework, and we recommended that those be transferable. On agriculture, I was quite surprised to be set on agriculture. I think the last farm in Warren was probably in the 70s, and you know, it's like where do I fit in? Where does my voice? And then as we're talking and as we're getting presentations from the department, you know, and industry, you realize, you know, how much we engage in agriculture, even when a farm isn't in our community. We have a 4-H program here in Warren. Again, in my head, that was always a farm kid program, but there are lots of programs that they offer for free or low price that engages our kids in community farming, community gardening, but also character and leadership development program. They offer day camps and summer programming, community gardening. And one of the overwhelming asks for their priorities is needing more people going into agricultural professions. And we talked about a lot of times that engagement goes to very rural areas. I said, but we have urban farming, and we have people who like to fly drones. It has been eye-opening. We have people who are truckers, and they are the same people, whether they truck long haul or local or automotive, who can also truck dairy and grain and other products, and we need them in rural areas as well as urban areas, suburban areas. You know, I was very interested when they started talking about flying drones in order to map mineral rights as well as fertilizer application. And I was like, we have a lot of, especially young people, who enjoy hobbies like flying drones that don't realize that it has a practical application. People will pay you to do that. So we need to have those conversations in the community. You might not see yourself working on farms or in the farm supply, but there are real jobs, well-paying jobs, and people, we should have the big picture on what that looks like as our kids select their career opportunities. A very timely topic is the Affordable Housing Subcommittee everywhere in the states as well as across the country is dealing in affordable housing. We allocated $150 million in a budget supplemental early in the term for the purpose of housing affordability. There are districts across the state that have been set up, and each community gets to decide how they think housing affordability will be best addressed in our community. So a couple weeks ago, I sat in on the formation of that organization, and I'm anxious to see what the recommendations are. Once we have established our community advocacy plan, then we can apply for those funds and they will push those out, and then we can spend them locally. Hi, how's it going? Good to see ya. I'm part of, so what I call my after school clubs, being a teacher, are your caucuses. So one of the way we have to organize as legislators with common interests is to set up a caucus and work on legislation together on those. And so I am the chairperson for the Education Caucus with over 14 years in the classroom, in the community. It's a great place for me to exercise my expertise and my voice. I'm part of the Poverty and Homeless Caucus, and I lead on the youth homelessness and package of bipartisan bills, have come out of those experiences. I am now part of the Detroit Caucus. It's third of my district. Crosses 8 Mile into Detroit. It's been very interesting to see the Detroit approach when you have a big population, how you approach some of the solutions on water affordability, housing affordability, community mental health. And by sitting in on those meetings and being a party to it, has given me a lot of ideas on things, different approaches we can take in our community. I'm part of the Progressive Women's Caucus, the Legislative Labor Caucus, having been a member of the MEA union as a Fitzgerald teacher and an active advocate for workers' rights. It's something I'm passionate about. I'm part of the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus, the Automotive Caucus, the Aerospace and Defense Caucus. We often think of WARN as automotive. We don't always think of WARN as our key geographic role in the defense industry. And there's a lot of opportunities to draw down federal funding and to encourage local suppliers to not only serve automotive, the ability to serve automotive means that you can also produce manufacturing for defense. And so it's a way to grow our economy. Having lost a parent to cancer, I'm an active advocate with the Cancer Caucus. I'm active in the Disability Caucus, working on improving ADA standards, and I've secured $100,000 in grants for offering universal height adjustable changing tables I didn't consider what happens when someone who needs assistance ages out of infant changing tables. And we know whether people have a disability, autism, even aging can impact their ability and need for assistance. And this is some basic equipment that, if it's available in a community, creates a pathway for inclusion for everyone. I'm an ally with LGBTQ Caucus. I'm part of the Environmental Justice Caucus. We have a significant Asian Pacific American population in Warren, and as an ally, I am an advocate with the APA Caucus. I'm part of the Creative Arts Caucus, the Sportsmen's Caucus, and the MSU Spartans Caucus. And these are ways that we bring together our voices. We find common ground and work on policy together. Okay, I'll get that after. So, in addition, so what do I do? The first 4 months have been epic. I've been doing this. This is the start of my 5th year in the legislature, and we have never moved so quickly, so efficiently, got committees up and running, and we're passing legislation. So far, Governor Whitmer has signed into law that civil rights protections for gender identity and sexual orientation is part of the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. We have passed packages of gun violence prevention legislation, including universal background checks, safe storage, and we recently passed the Extreme Risk Protection Order legislation. You may have heard it referred to as ERPO or the red flag laws. This creates a due process for those who are potentially a threat to themselves and others. And can we agree that anyone who has the right to bear arms also has the responsibility of taking care of those? In the Democratic legislature, we are providing financial relief, as we promised, to expand the working families tax credit from 6% to 30%. That is going to see the greatest return on earnings for moderate and low-income families. We have repealed the senior retirement pension tax, and that's not just for private or public pensions. It also includes IRAs, 401ks. It helps fixed incomes go further to the tune of almost $1,000 a year, almost $100 a month. We've restored workers' rights that were stripped under the Snyder administration. We restored prevailing wage, which makes sure that workers that provide labor don't have their wages sacrificed to underbid contracts. We repealed the archaic and antiquated 1931 legislation that contradicts the constitutional amendment Michigan voters adopted in November that guarantees access to safe abortion health care, and we're not going back. My policy priorities, so those are caucus-wide and legislative-wide policy priorities, but personally within my office, on Thursday I introduced a package of bills, 4455 and 4456, putting into statute, so taking some of, this is going to be controversial, Governor Whitmer's orders, emergency orders. One of them is having insurance coverage on 90-day prescription access for maintenance meds. So if you're like me, during COVID, you realize, oh my gosh, I only have to go to the pharmacy 4 times a year. And I have my 3 months worth of maintenance meds. And I went back and I was talking to my personal physician, and I said, you know, I realized that every time I have to go to the pharmacy, I got 3-day window basically to make sure that I get it and get the next month's supply. He said when I only had to go 3 times a year, I had about a week to do that. And boy, it was less stressful. I made sure I took my medicine that I needed to every day. And in talking in the community, people agreed. So we said, hey, sometimes we realize that policies can be shifted and changed and improved. And I said, why are we stopping doing that? Let's require that insurances continue to do that. You have the choice If you only want 30 days at a time, you can choose that. You want 60 days at a time, you can choose that. But if you would prefer to limit your trips to the pharmacy, then you can choose that as well. And seeing greater adherence to health protocols is going to yield better health outcomes for communities. So it's important. I'm also working on a kindergarten prerequisite. Families can enroll a child in first grade without any preschool or kindergarten experience. That first grade teacher then has the obligation to teach fundamental education foundations, all of first grade, and prepare all of the kids ready for second grade. And as an educator, that's not fair. That is not reasonable. That is a big lift, especially in first grade. Some people go, is kindergarten and first grade that big a difference? Now, if you've worked with a kindergarten and a first grader, it's a big difference. I'm working on a financial literacy bill that would allow an high school economics credit to be fulfilled with financial literacy. We're getting pushback from economics teachers who are like, we teach world economy, we teach local economy, but there is nothing as tangible to a young adult as personal economy, and it is in the state standards on economics. Financial literacy is economics. Our priority for the next 10 weeks till the end of June is the 2023-24 state budget. The governor has already submitted her proposed budget to the legislature. It was presented to our appropriations committee. Appropriation committees are prioritizing expenditures and taking meetings. Everyone this time of year will tell you how much they need, what they want it for, how much more they want, and then based on how much we have in tax revenue, we make those decisions on where those go. May will be the CREC. The CREC is the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, and that is where the House Fiscal Agency, the Senate Fiscal Agency, and the Governor's Budget Agency look at the revenue projections for Michigan State, and they say how much we have to work with. Those estimates are recalculated every month. Michigan cannot go into a deficit. We have a requirement to maintain a balanced budget, and every month departments have to change their spending and budget based on changes on revenue income. So once we get that in May, we as the legislature will negotiate budgets, and we will present, hopefully by the end of June, to the governor what the state budget will be for the following year. In district, Mondays and Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, and Saturdays and Sundays. A lot of people are like, you only work 3 days a week. Come on, it's a joke. What are you actually doing for us? But as you can see, I work weekends too. I work evenings when I'm invited. I answer constituents' requests, even on weekends, even during the Mondays and Fridays. We have remote working. Laptops and internet make what we can do a lot broader. I continue to work on legislative policy. Honestly, when I'm in meetings, in committee, in session, all Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, there's not a whole lot of work on new policy getting done. That's that time on Mondays and Fridays that I can sit down with my legislative director and we can talk about what policies do we need to start on, what do we need to do next, and where do we go from here. I also take meetings virtually in person on my in-district time. I also tour and visit district organizations and businesses. Friday I was at Disability Network for Oakland and Macomb, and they had discussion on better transportation options. It's important for people with disability in order to have access to resources they need, but also to hold down a job. But we also know that public transportation is not just for people with disability. It's people who don't have a car, don't want a car, It can be environmental impact, it can be economic impact. There's so many impacts that public transportation. And so they had some ideas that they brought to us, and we'll continue to explore them and see what the funding available is. I wrapped up March's Reading Month. I read at 5 elementaries and 5 districts, including Pulaski, Pinewood, Crothers, Carlson, and Crescentwood. It's probably my favorite time of the year because I continue to be plugged in the classroom, talking to students about government and leadership. And let me tell you, our kindergarten to 5th graders do have real questions. And we just had Crothers Elementary and the Central Line schools up to the Capitol right after New Year's. And when I was in 4th grade, I don't know that I could have picked my legislative representative out of a crowd. But as soon as I walked up, they knew who I was, they knew my name, and we had a relationship because I've been reading to them since they were in kindergarten. And so I take pride in that as an educator, that they understand the role government plays in their life as a kid. And we talk about you don't have to wait to vote for government to be important to you. I also treated teachers and staff to lunch to express my appreciation. Having been a teacher, you can't say thank you enough for what educators do for us. They make every profession possible. And so I take that opportunity to sit in the teacher's lounge and find out firsthand what are the biggest challenges they're encountering. And what can I do in the legislature to help make that easier? April is Arab American Heritage Month. The Arab diaspora is characterized by anyone who speaks Arabic. It crosses boundaries of countries, continents, and religions. So I went to the Arab American Museum in Dearborn. It's fantastic. If you haven't gone and you're looking for something to do, it's a great learning opportunity. It's beautiful. It's well cared for. Great. And so the first question the tour guide asks is, what does it mean to be Arab? Some people associate it with Middle Eastern countries, but not every Middle Eastern country is an Arab country, and there are countries in Africa that are. Often people associate being Arab with being Muslim, but not every Arab is Muslim, and not every Muslim is Arab. Immigration has created Greater Detroit area as one of the largest Arab American communities outside of the Middle East. And we live in a community rich with Arab American culture, including food, language, holidays. So Eid Mubarak to our Muslim neighbors who are celebrating. And it's just a great way to familiarize yourself a little better. April is also Autism Awareness Month. Being a teacher, I'm acutely aware. We have a lot of kids and adults in the community. And also, I don't see autism as a disability. I see autism as a different ability. It means your brain's wired a little differently. And some people with autism have a lot of sensory input, but they also can process information differently. And so in the legislature, we've added, people can self-elect to identify as having, both autistic or a hearing impairment on their ID, because when police interact, like pull someone over, and they don't know that you have a barrier, they often will treat and not adapt to the person and not understand, why aren't you following my directions? When really there may be a barrier to it, and they might take another approach when they're aware that there's something going on. So I'm very proud of that legislation. We continue identifying services to support, educate, employ, and provide behavioral health. I just toured Autism Systems off of Mound, newly opened there next to the post office. They provide one-on-one behavioral health for young people up to age 26, so even developing independent living skills. And it's beautiful, it's fabulous if you ever get a chance to tour it. But also, if you encounter a family who is looking for autism resources, we have the Judson Center, we have Autism Systems, we have a lot of community resources that you don't even have to leave our community. Sometimes that's a barrier, how far you're going. And you know what I'm going to dip into is election regulations, because there's a lot of misconceptions about a role a elected official who is also a candidate has to abide by. So campaigns and stateside regulations are separate. Everything has to be maintained separately. You don't often notice, and they don't always tell you what the rules and regulations are, but because this may be an issue locally, I think it's important for transparency for the community to understand what are the regulations that a candidate who is also serving has to abide by. These are in statute, in law, and they're monitored. Candidates cannot post pictures with other people for roughly 6 months leading up to on official communications. That includes social media, print media, because it perceives to be an implied endorsement. And so some people are like, oh, that representative, they only just post pictures of themselves. They just must think that they're super special. And no, at a certain point, they have to respect the blackout period, and they will not post pictures with themselves and any community members, community leaders. Now, that being said, community members do not have the same restrictions and regulation as an elected official do. So if a community member posts a picture and tags an elected official, that's your freedom of speech, and you have that right. And you are self-electing to do that. So if you see those discrepancies, please know that why they're doing what they're doing. Restrictions on mass communications. The month before a primary or general election, an elected official who is also a candidate cannot mass mail, because some people go, well, they're just sending that mail piece for a campaign, and there are restrictions on where and when you can send that when you are serving both roles. You cannot use tax dollars or use the benefit of your role as an elected official for campaign purposes. Those have to be strictly divided. So I know that there's been times when conversations, a community conversation, have been asking one, and purposely those conversations have had to be redirected for the very purpose that this role is strictly regulated. I serve a whole community, elected officials serve whole communities, and those are separate roles. Keep in mind, elected officials often have more than one social media profile. And so they might often have an official profile, a personal profile, and or a campaign side that have different rules that apply to them. So you might be like, well, that candidate put up a picture, a family picture, but that might have been on a group picture, and that might have been on a personal profile that is separate from a campaign or elected profile. Follow me on Facebook to get regular updates on what I'm working on. I post 3 to 5 times a week where I'm at. It might be tidbits, facts, historical things you need to know that are coming down. May's community conversation will be Saturday, May 20th at Franklin Branch of the Detroit Public Library. As far as I know, they still have a masking requirement. If you don't bring your own, they have them available for you. Earl joined me there last month. They were so receptive. It was my first Detroit crossover event. Had a fantastic 25-person turnout. Lots of questions, and what came out of the conversation is their community had been under-engaged for the last 10 years. So they were hungry to be involved.